Everybody, welcome to tonight's edition of From the Boardroom to the Locker Room as we look forward to what promises to be an absolutely fantastic sporting weekend. Let's start with some of the results, and it was action last night at the US Open. An amazing comeback. Just 3 months or 2 months ago, she was beaten, Amanda Anisimova, 6-love, 6-love by Iga Swiatek in the final of Wimbledon. She was in absolute tears at the end of that Grand Slam final after doing so well to get to the final. Well, revenge is sweet. She had revenge during the week in the quarterfinals against the very self-same Iga Swiatek. And last night she beat Naomi Osaka in an absolute thriller, 6-3 in the final set to make her way into the final. The best part of it for her is that hopefully she has learnt from that Wimbledon final, because she will be facing the world number one, Aryna Sabalenka, who also came from a set down to win her semi-final against the American favorite Jessica Pegula. It was almost an all-American final between Anisimova and Pegula, but it turned out that Sabalenka eventually came through in the final set 6-4. The final score there: first set going to Pegula 6-4, second set 6-3 to Sabalenka, and 6-4 in the third. So she is through to the US Open final. That final takes place in the early hours of Sunday morning, Saturday night. And later on tonight, it's the big one, and everybody's talking about it. Can Novak Djokovic get through to the final, or is it going to be Alcaraz against Sinner again? So the two semi-finals tonight: Yannick Sinner takes on Felix Auger-Aliassime, the Canadian, and Novak Djokovic plays Carlos Alcaraz. This repeat of the semi-final at Wimbledon, and perhaps this time, maybe, just maybe, Djokovic can get one over Alcaraz. It is Djokovic's favorite surface, the hard courts at the US Open, and he has got a bit of a tainted history with the crowd there, and we'll see who he gets behind him, or whether he doesn't or does get the crowd behind him tonight in that other semi-final. So the two semi-finals tonight: Yannick Sinner against Felix Auger-Aliassime, and Novak Djokovic against Carlos Alcaraz is the first one. The Sinner semi-final is the second one. These ones, of course, best of 5 sets. So cricket, and well done to the Proteas. Another magnificent performance last night in coming through against England, even though England did come close in the end, but they were chasing what would have been a record-breaking score. Matthew Bretsky became the first batsman in one-day international cricket history to pass 50 in his first 5 innings, with a brilliant 85 to help South Africa to a very, very good total, over par total of 330 for 8, before a consummate bowling and fielding display earned South Africa a nail-biting win by just 5 runs. In the second one-day international against England at Lord's, the Proteas clinched the 3-match series following their overwhelming 7-wicket victory against the hosts in the first match at Headingley in Leeds on Tuesday. England required a record run chase, and it began in dramatic fashion with Nandre Burgo finding Jamie Smith's inside edge with a very first ball before fellow opener Ben Duckett was bowled reverse sweeping Keshav Maharaj for an uncharacteristic laboured 14 of just 33 balls with a single 4. But Joe Root's 61, Jacob Bethel's very good 58, and Josh Butler's 61 kept England in the game. Well, Jack smashed boundaries in the final 5 overs for his 39, including a reverse swept 6 against spinner Sinuran Muthusamy. England hopes flickered until the final over before they were restricted to 325 for 9. Jofre Archer hit 27 from 14 balls with a pair of 4s and 6s, but was unable to score the 16 required to win off the final over, bowled by the nerveless Muthusamy. Bretsky, though, faced just 77 balls, striking 7 4s and 3 6s, and added 147 with Tristan Stubbs, who did look set for an even bigger score, having reached a composed 58 from 62 before Devont Brevis declined a second run, leaving his partner stranded and run out. I'm sure the conversation between those two at the end of the game was not one about how can I buy you a drink. But be that as it may, that's just cricket. I'm sure everybody who's ever played the game has been run out or run somebody out before. Now, the fixtures for the rest of the weekend promises to be a fantastic weekend of fixtures in cricket, with South Africa playing once again in the one-day international arena And that, of course, will be against the English come Sunday. Lots of other big sporting events coming up over the course of the weekend. We will be focusing and looking forward to a whole load of them on From the Boardroom to the Locker Room this evening. None other, of course, than the Grand Prix at Imola. It's the Italian Grand Prix. The Tifosi will be there in force, I am sure. Lewis Hamilton and Charles Leclerc driving those red Ferraris, scarlet red Ferraris. Let me make sure that I get that right for you. Of course, after the two Ferraris crashed out last weekend, they will be looking, of course, for a much better weekend, as will Lando Norris, who unfortunately had a difficult time when his engine, particularly apparently an oil problem in his engine, and his car had to retire. He, of course, had to retire as well. But the car retired, the driver in the car retired, which of course allowed Oscar Piastri to go on to win the Grand Prix and extend his lead in the Drivers' Championship. Of course, Norris looking to bounce back as the weekend progresses. There, of course, are other drivers. Let's not forget Max Verstappen. Doing exceptionally well is Verstappen. That Red Bull seems to be getting better and better as the season goes along and the second half of the season. Don't think Verstappen has the ability to get through to win the Drivers' Championship. He's too far behind, but he has, of course, decided that he will stay on at Red Bull for next year when, of course, will be new regulations as well as new rules. Now, the battles, the controversy, and the drama will continue this weekend, and it is going to be a good one. So there's been a shake-up with the 2025 grid. Only two teams, McLaren and Aston Martin, have stuck with their lineup from last year. Seven-time world champion Lewis Hamilton switched to Ferrari is the biggest change. Of course, the Italian Grand Prix at Monza promises to be an absolute cracker. There's no sprint race this weekend, qualifying at 4 o'clock South African time. The main race at 3 o'clock on Sunday afternoon. Going to be the battle, I guess, between the McLarens and the others. I wonder if there's going to be team orders now that Piastri is so far ahead of his teammate. I know I say so far ahead of his teammate. Let's just remember that with 25 points up for grabs and an over 30-point difference between the two, the fact that Norris can finish 6 races and win all 6, and if Piastri finishes second in those 6 races, it'll still be Piastri who will be leading. So what has to happen for Norris' sake and Norris's fans is that Piastri has to have a do not finish or did not finish a DNF, and then perhaps Lando Norris could catch up again. But the Drivers' Championship is still up for grabs. The Constructors' Championship, you might as well write McLaren's name on that trophy again. Now, let's look at some other sporting action and news that took place through the course of the week. And last night, Daniel Levy stepped down as Tottenham executive chairman in a shock move after a controversial reign lasting 25 years almost. Levy was the driving force behind Spurs' £1.2 billion stadium and state-of-the-art training centre. But the 63-year-old was a polarising figure amongst Spurs fans, with numerous protests against him during difficult spells for the Premier League team. He is also the longest-serving chairman in the Premier League and had come under fire more than once over the last few seasons. A series of failed managerial appointments and the club's transfer policy infuriated supporters and turned up the heat on Levy, who was accused of caring more about the club's financial profits than success on the pitch. Tottenham endured their worst top-flight finish since 1976-77 last season, coming 17th before salvaging the campaign by winning the Europa League, qualify for the Champions League. That success, which ended Spurs' 17-year trophy drought, was not enough to spare boss Ange Postecoglou from Levy's wrath as the Australian was sacked after 2 turbulent seasons in charge. Levy has hired Thomas Frank from Brentford to replace Postecoglou in the last significant decision of his reign. In a statement from the club, he said he's incredibly proud of the work he's done together with the executive team and all the employees. They've built the club into a global heavyweight competing at the highest level. Well, they won't be competing this weekend because it is an international weekend and there were a whole host of matches last night. Let's have a look at some of those. Of course, it's World Cup qualifiers this weekend to next week. That's why there's no matches in any of the leagues. Let's start with the African World Cup qualifiers. Tunisia beat Liberia by 3-0. Mali beat Comoros 3-0. Cameroon beat Eswatini 3-0. Also 3-1 this time for Algeria over Botswana. Sao Tome and Principe lost 3-2 to Equatorial Guinea. Mauritius 0. Cape Verde 2, Madagascar 2, Central African Republic 0, Guinea-Bissau and Sierra Leone drew 1-1, Angola 0, Libya 1. Angola are out of the World Cup. Chad and Ghana drew 1-1. Those were the results in Africa. But some very interesting European World Cup qualifiers that got underway. The Netherlands and Poland drew 1-1. Slovakia beat Germany 2-0. That's not the start the Germans wanted for their World Cup campaign. Luxembourg won, Northern Ireland 3. Liechtenstein got beaten 6-0 at home by Belgium. Bulgaria got beaten at home 3-0 by Spain, while Lithuania and Malta drew 1-1. Georgia 2, Turkey 3, Kazakhstan 0, Wales 1. Good results for the Welsh. There were some international matches last night. Gibraltar 0, Albania 1, Russia and Jordan drew 0-0. Norway 1, Finland 0, Saudi Arabia 2, North Macedonia 0. Now there's lots and lots of fixtures coming up tonight, tomorrow and Sunday. And that, of course, is all to do with the World Cup. And as far as the South Africans are concerned, the real big one in South Africa is the game, firstly against Lesotho, and then South Africa will be in action against Nigeria. Now, this, of course, is still going on, the whole scenario with the way South Africa played with a player that was supposed to have been suspended due to an extra yellow card, and still not sure how that is going to play out. But of course, it is a Lesotho home game, but they are playing in Bloemfontein, which is where South Africa have had a magnificent support in the last couple of years, and they will hopefully be looking to continue on with that fantastic run. They need, obviously, just one more win, and then as long as there's no more controversy, they will qualify for the World Cup, which would be great because bear in mind, they, of course, last time they played in the World Cup was in 2010 when they were hosts of the World Cup. They actually didn't qualify for that World Cup, so it would be great that Hugo Bruce's men do qualify properly for the World Cup, albeit any way we can get there will be fantastic. Of course, the World Cup coming up in the United States, Mexico, and Canada. So it will be a fantastic World Cup, and I'm sure that the South Africans will all be wanting to be there. They have done really well, have South Africa, in this World Cup campaign, and they've done even better under the last season or two under Hugo Bruce, and I am sure that they will be looking forward to coming out of this weekend with the results that will put them into the next round of the competition. So the fixtures for the World Cup weekend: today, Australia play New Zealand in FIFA International. That is not a World Cup qualifier. And then African World Cup qualifiers tonight see Somalia play Guinea, South Sudan play the DRC, Kenya play Gambia, Namibia play Malawi, Benin play Zimbabwe, Djibouti play Burkina Faso. Then at 6 o'clock, Lesotho play South Africa. That game's on at the moment. Uganda against Mozambique, Ivory Coast against Burundi, and Egypt play Ethiopia, while Mauritania host Togo, Morocco host Niger, and Senegal host Sudan. The European World Cup qualifiers see the Faroe Islands play Croatia, Greece play Belarus, Iceland play Azerbaijan, Moldova play Israel, Montenegro play Czechia, Slovenia play Sweden, Switzerland play Kosovo, Denmark, Scotland, Italy in action as well in World Cup action this evening. So lots to look forward to as far as the World Cup is concerned. It is the global showpiece of world football. The qualifiers continue on, and the results and the stories behind those stories I will bring to you in the Monday edition of From the Boardroom to the Locker Room. But lots to talk about as far as the football is concerned. Of course, through the course of the week, the transfer window closed, and it was a massive, massive signing for Liverpool, getting Alexander Isak from Newcastle United for £125 million. £125 million. That is an awful lot of money. It's a British transfer record. English Premier League spent more money in the transfer window than all the other leagues combined. That is just crazy, crazy money that was spent. And unfortunately for fans of the Premier League, they won't see those players in action until next weekend when the Premier League gets underway again, because, of course, of the FIFA weekend, this weekend and into early next week with the matches. I'll give you all those matches for next week in the Monday edition of From the Boardroom to the Locker Room. Now, we're waiting, of course, for the big one at the end of the month as far as golf is concerned with the Ryder Cup. But there were a couple of announcements with regards to the Ryder Cup over the last couple of days. And Sergio Garcia, who didn't make it into the Ryder Cup, he thinks he was snubbed. He has pulled out of the Irish Open that's currently underway because he was disappointed at not being selected as the captain's pick. Luke Donald revealed his picks this week with Garcia, a 10-time Ryder Cup selection, not amongst them. He says, I felt like I was so looking forward to being a part of that team. So I felt like mentally, it was kind of tough. So, of course, he didn't make that nod in the team. As far as the golf events are concerned, there is golf going on at the moment. As far as the schedule is concerned, the Sunbet Challenge is also underway, as is the Irish Open. So lots and lots of golf going on at the moment. And as I say, that Ryder Cup that is coming up, 2 teams have been selected. Luke Donald did not choose himself as a player in the tournament, even though he could have as a captain's pick, although it would have been a bit difficult for him because the kind of rules of the Ryder Cup might have had to have been adjusted to allow him to get onto the golf course as a player and a captain, because as a player you can't be involved with other players, but as captain you can be involved. A little bit confusing and complicated, and we will be talking, of course, to our golf correspondent Dale Hayes later on in the month for that Ryder Cup competition. It's always a big one. They're off to Bethpage Black, which is where that Ryder Cup will take place this year. Europe will be looking for revenge with regards to winning in the United States after that battle at Medina all those years ago. So, what else can we expect over the weekend as far as sport is concerned? Let's talk now Currie Cup rugby, because it is the last round of the Currie Cup competition, as well, of course, as the Women's World Cup and then the Rugby Championship. So we'll end this evening's program by looking at rugby. The Sharks take on the Pumas tonight in the Currie Cup. Tomorrow morning, early, 2 o'clock, Samoa take on Fiji. Uruguay tomorrow evening play Chile. Those are international rugby matches. Then the Women's Rugby World Cup sees Canada against Scotland, the USA against Samoa, Wales against Fiji, and England against Australia. Currie Cup action, Western Province play the Cavaliers, the Lions play the Griquas, while the Bulls play the Cheetahs. And then on Sunday, the Japanese women play Spain, Italy play Brazil, New Zealand play Ireland, and France play South Africa. None of those games have any significance with regards to the teams that have qualified for the quarterfinal. It does have a significance as to who will play who will finish top of each of those pools, and then who plays who. But all 8 teams have been confirmed for the quarterfinals of the Rugby World Cup. Interesting as far as the Currie Cup is concerned, that the Bulls, New Look Bulls, and Springbok loose forward Marcel Coetzee captains the New Look Bulls team in their final Carling Currie Cup match of the season against the Cheetahs tomorrow night. The coach, Johan Ackerman, who stepped in to manage the transition between the Currie Cup and Vodacom URC, has loaded the side with veterans, amongst them Johan Grobler, Ambrose Papier, David Creel, and Devon Williams. Of course, we are at the end now of the Currie Cup, and perhaps little bit disturbing in terms of the way the teams are going to be composed this weekend, because these URC players, franchise players, have not been involved in the Currie Cup. So the likes of Boerland and so on, and the Pumas, who don't have these franchise players, might be a little bit disadvantaged. How do they look going into the final round? Well, Griquas 25 points, 23 points to the Cavaliers. The Lions 21, as well as the Cheetahs 21, and a very outside chance for the Pumas with 20. Those 5 teams fighting it out. Griquas and Cavaliers, I guess, are pretty much the Lions, and the Cheetahs will be fighting it out for 3rd, maybe 2nd or 3rd place, and then the Pumas do have that absolute outside chance if the results go their way. But they will have to beat the Sharks tonight, and then tomorrow. The thing about the game tonight is that the other teams will know once the Pumas, if they don't win tonight, then those top 4 spots have been chosen. So Western Province against the Cavaliers, that's a big game, 2:45 tomorrow afternoon. The Lions against the Griquas, and the Bulls against the Cheetahs. So that is your Currie Cup action. And now rugby. When we say rugby, of course, that was rugby as well. Let's not forget about it. But the focus this weekend most definitely is on one game and one game only, which we'll talk about in a minute. But let's first of all talk about the other game that's earlier on in the morning. And that is the game between the Australians and Argentina. This, of course, is the Rugby Championship. That is the early game, so lots of rugby if you're a fan of rugby to watch tomorrow between the Currie Cup, the Rugby Championship, as well, of course, as the Women's World Cup. 6 o'clock tomorrow morning, Australia against Argentina. Remember, all these teams have won one game so far this season going into the competition, which is quite remarkable. Normally, you would have thought that one or another team would have won two. Australia, Argentina, New Zealand, and the Springboks, of course, all involved in this Castle Lager Rugby Championship. The first game tomorrow sees Australia against Argentina. Australia, who, of course, beat South Africa. Argentina, who beat the All Blacks, so you can't really call that one. I am going to put my money on Argentina. I think they might win that one by 5 or 6 points, but that's just my thought process for that game. Obviously, Australian rugby picking up after that victory against South Africa. It should be a full house at the Allianz Stadium in Sydney, but going into it, Argentina have a much better record than Australia, having won 3 of their last 5 meetings, and their last win was a mammoth one, 67-27. They beat the Australians in September of last year. They did lose the previous one by a single point. Mainly, these games have been pretty close, but I think it's going to be a very close call as far as that one is. And the big one, everybody talking about that big one, and that, of course, is South Africa against the All Blacks. That game is big for more than one reason. First of all, it is arguably the 2 best teams. Perhaps Ireland can maybe fit in there, the 2 best teams in the world. But of course, it's also a battle of the 2 teams that have won the Rugby World Cup the most number of times. But what makes this game so much more special than any other one, I guess if there was going to be a little tick box that Rassie Erasmus, the Springbok coach, would have wanted to get on his bucket list, would have been a victory at Eden Park in Auckland. South Africa have not won there since even before Noah loaded the Ark. And the All Blacks don't almost ever lose there. So this is what makes this game such an important one. The South African team that will go out tomorrow. Willie Leroux at fullback, Cheslin Colby, Jesse Creel, Damien Dalendi, Kanan Moody, the halfback pairing of Grant Williams and Andre Pollard. Siya Kolisi at number 8, Peter Steph du Toit at 7, Marco van Staden at 6. Ruan Nokia and Evan Etzebeth will lock the scrum with Thomas the Tank du Toit, Malcolm Marks and Ox Inchi in the front row. On the bench, Jan-Henrik Wessels, Bowen Venter, Wilco Low, Loot de Jager, Quagga Smith, Kobus Reinach, Sasha Feinberg and Gomazulu and Ethan Hooker. Not the strongest bench that the Springboks have ever put out. And of course, the captaincy stays with Jesse Creel. Now, the story behind that is that Jesse Creel was given the captaincy earlier in the week because Siya Kolisi was in doubt to actually play the game. But then Jean-Luc Duprier, one of the most unlucky rugby players ever, got an injury, which meant that they had to fast-track Kolisi back into the side. And Duprier was originally selected to play at number 8, but because of that knee injury, he pulled out of the game. In fact, he's already on his way back to South Africa. So Rassie had already told Jesse Creel that he would be captain, and he said it was only fair for him to keep things that way. He's a great leader and a core player in the team. I do just think to myself that it might also be the fact that I don't know that Kolisi is going to be able to play the entire game. Springboks go in search of their 5th victory in a row against the All Blacks when the teams meet tomorrow. They won their last 4 matches against their arch rivals, clinching the Freedom Cup against them last season for the first time since 2009. But the last time the Springboks beat the All Blacks at Eden Park was in 1937. It's a long-standing record. They will be determined to end this weekend. At the same time, the All Blacks have not lost at this ground since 1994. The other big news is Springbok lock Eben Etzebeth will extend his record as the most capped Bok of all time to 136 tests. Siya Kolisi will play his 95th test match, leaving him just 5 short of becoming the 9th Springbok centurion in the history of the game. Willie Leroux earns his 101st test match cap after striking the 100 mark against Italy, and the centre pairing of Jesse Creel and Damien Dalendi will extend their record of playing the most tests together in the midfield to 39. Promises to be a magnificent sporting weekend. The big attraction, of course, is the Springboks versus the All Blacks. But as far as South Africans are concerned, they're in action in the Rugby World Cup. They're in action in the Rugby Nations competition against the All Blacks. They play France in the Women's World Cup. They play England in a one-day international. And they play Lesotho and then Nigeria on the football fields for World Cup qualifiers. So a massive weekend for South African sport. Hopefully, unlike a couple of weekends ago where we lost all 3 that we were involved in, hopefully South Africa can win all 4 this week. That is your weekend edition, previewing the weekend sport from the boardroom to the locker room. As always, have a great weekend, be nice to each other, and talk to you again soon. Bye for now.